Well, today is Poetry Sunday, so our speakers who are here are our fellow congregants, and they're going to share their poetry with you today. There are some longtime favorite poems being read, as well as some original works. I know you are all in for a treat today. Once again, I want to welcome everyone to Community Union Church and to Poetry Sunday. Do you remember memorizing poetry? Do teachers still assign poems to memorize? I don't know. Any teachers out there that assign poems? So see? Well, I used to think that memorizing a poem was intended to be good for your character. I don't know how it worked on my character. I don't have total recall of any of the poems I memorized long, long ago. But little snippets of verse float through my mind as I go about my daily activities. The boy stood on the burning deck when saw all but he had fled. That's in there. And there's not to reason why, there's but to do or die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Some of you remember it too, right? You have pieces of it at least, right? Or sometimes the moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas. The road was a ribbon of moonlight across the purple moor. When the highwayman came riding. The highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. How about water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink? They're all in there somewhere, ready to swim up to the surface unbidden. When we have memorized a poem, we say we have it by heart or we know it by heart. An apt description, because there is something about verse that bypasses the intellect and goes right to our emotional center. So in today's poetry, let us open our hearts and enjoy some poetry. All right. Our first poems are by Anita and Jeff Owerkerk. Anita's going first. Yay!
These are two poems that I wrote when I was taking a class in poetry at SMU a few years ago. And I like them, and I wrote several more, but I'll just read two today. The first one is The Man on the Mountain. The man on a mountain in a brown felt hat is angular, tall, and thin. In a three-piece 1920s suit, he's on top of the world of men. My sisters talk of his hunting quail and dove and bear, but I know nothing of that man. You see, I wasn't there. The California train trip is family history, Mama's broken net back, his steadfast love, just stories to the youngest me. They tell of cars, guns, hunting dogs, and family trips in Model A's with rumble seats I've only seen in movie clips. The man they knew on a mountain is one I never saw. I've only heard of 29, the Depression, war, siblings, and Ma. But once he stood on a mountain in a three-piece suit and hat, that stooped old white-haired daddy always thought of himself like that. That was in 1997 I wrote it. And this one is called The Monarch. Monarch butterfly, feeding, growing. Some do not see the growth, yet guided growth is change. This chrysalis, this rest, growth. Ready, magnificent, mature monarch rises, moves forward, mounting waves of wind for 2,000 miles. Who makes the wind move? Who makes monarch move home? I am the monarch, butterfly, growing, changing, preparing to fly. And I wrote that when I was getting ready to leave home.
Hi.
Hi.
So I guess in light of Mother's last poem, the poem I'll recite is called Windmills. We were on a road trip going through Kansas, and I was a small child, and looking out the window, there was this thing on a stick, looked like a pinwheel, and I asked what that was. And Dad said, well, that's a windmill. And for the briefest moment, I thought, now I know where the wind comes from. Windmills. Tireless, obedient, ever spinning. Can you hear it clattering? Or is it the wind? Are they one? Said. The Unnamed Sonnet. Oh, you have them there. Okay. So I'll stick to that script. So these are all in my head, I guess. The Unnamed Sonnet is, it goes together with Sonnet 29 by Shakespeare. I always read Sonnet 29 as a prayer instead of a love poem. And I wrote the Unnamed Sonnet in a place of darkness, and then remembered Sonnet 29 from a place of light. Shakespeare's, sonnet. I don't know how good this sonnet is that I wrote, or if it perfectly follows the sonnet form. When something like this: would it be vain for us to thank our Lord for gifts we think we have and not possessed, and here and there take up the bloodied sword, only to find uncertain heaven's rest? We think that for a moment we would place all we labored day and night to find within a blessed sanctuary safe from all endeavors to us world would bind. Yet, in these thoughts we know we have not found that which soul sought endlessly to claim, and by uncertainty that we are bound to war within our form, to maw and maim. If only the words you spoke were true, eternally my faith be placed in you. Rather dark. But it goes together with Shakespeare's sonnet. Oh, thank you. That's what I needed. When in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most desire contented least. No, it's okay. Myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like unto the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate. For thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Anyway, that's all I have. With help from the audience.
Thank you so much for sharing the lovely poetry. Our next group of poems will be read by Valerie Gomes.
These are all original poems. The first one is about loss. Where is my heart of gold? How is it you have vanished? I listen to your voice and call in empty rooms. I search the gardens and the wooded places. I call again, but no one answers. My voice sounds small and lost. I wander the roads of the world, and you're not there. You are lost to me, my heart, my heart, my heart of gold. The next two poems are about living in this country now. Monsters. The monsters are here, in their charming masks, in their sweet voices that sound in our ears. They no longer hide in the shadows. They no longer pretend to be good. They reach out with media claws to tear sense and reality to shreds. Their masks are off. Their sharp teeth shine in the world dark. And this is politics as usual. The shots ring out again and again and again, almost boring, relegated to quick and off in news releases. Again and again we hear, our thoughts and prayers are with you. Are the thoughts of people bleeding, wounded, dying? Are the prayers to a God they claim to believe in? When everything they do says, our thoughts are cruel, we pray to ourselves, for with such weapons, we are gods.
Thanks very much, Val. Next up is Joyce Thompson with a poem that speaks to me. I think you'll probably have some thoughts about it too.
Well, I would say that Valerie's poems are a hard act to follow, actually. And I did not write this poem. Back during COVID, I decided that I would either listen to online or read a poem every day, which was a bright spot in my life. And I ended up subscribed to poets.org. It's free to subscribe, and as a result of it, every day, every morning, there's a new poem in my inbox. For the most part, they're by contemporary poets, probably people that we would not have heard about otherwise. And they tend to have months that are themed. So they had poems by Black poets one month, and last month all the poems were by LGBTQ poets. And this month that we're finishing up, all the poems are by people with disabilities. And their poems are just breathtaking and made me realize how little we hear their voices. You know, you may hear someone with a disability, blindness, or a chronic illness or something. You may hear them interviewed, but through the poetry you can hear how they really feel. And so it's been a wonderful month. So I encourage you to look into poets.org. As I said, it's free to subscribe, and they'll ask for a donation every once in a while, but I think their main point is they want to expose people to these otherwise unknown poets, some of whom do have books. So after all that hype about this month for poets with disabilities, I'm not going to read you a poem by them. I'm going to read you one that pertains so much to my own life that it just grabbed me. And I think it's not long, and it manages to convey everything in relatively few words. And I think that many of you here are probably, will relate to it very much, as Sarah suggested. It's I Dare You by Dorian Law. And Dorian, like many of the poets on this website, teaches fine arts at a small university, North Carolina State U, and she does some other things. And she is 71 years old. So I dare you. It's autumn, and we're getting rid of books, getting ready to retire, to move someplace smaller. more manageable. We're living in reverse. Age-proofing the new house, nothing on the floors to trip over, no hindrances to the slowed mechanisms of our bodies. A small table for two. Our world is shrinking. Our closets mostly empty. Gone the tight skirts and the dancing shoes, the bells and the whistles. Now, when someone comes to visit and admires the complete works of Shakespeare, the hawk feather in the open dictionary, the iron angel on the shelf, we say, "Take them." This is the most important time of all, the age of divestment. Knowing what we leave behind is like the fragrance of blossoming trees that grow stronger after you've passed them, breathing them in for a moment before then breathing them out. An ordinary Tuesday, when one of you says, "I dare you," and the other one just laughs.
Thank you so much, Joyce. Like I said, that really speaks to me. We have a special treat today. Nancy Barlow will read a selection of founding member Mitsu Bader's poems.
What a pleasure it is this morning to talk a bit about Mitsu Bader, one of our founding members and a talented Tanka poet. From the early days of our church, Mitsu contributed a lovely, calm presence. It was a pleasure to be around her. Joe and Mitsu formed a bond early in their acquaintanceship, back in the 70s someplace, because he was the only person she had met in America who had been to her home island of Hokkaido. Only person she'd met in America who had ever been to Hokkaido. Our church community so valued both Mitsu and her husband Bob. But as often happens, our friends have so many facets that we miss seeing a side of them. And while we all knew Mitsu as the respected food manager of the local junior high near her home, everyone who worked for her said she was wonderful, the kids loved her, it was a long time before we realized the extent of her poetic abilities. In 2004, in Japan, was published an exquisite volume of her poems. And suddenly we began to think of Mitsu as a poet. She was a Tanka poet, and Tanka is a classic form of Japanese poetry dating to the 8th century. Unlike haiku with the familiar 3-line 5-7-5 pattern, syllable pattern, Tanka is more difficult. It follows a 5-7-5-7-7 syllable pattern. In Japan, it's often written as one extended line, and in Mitsu's books, you will see that it isn't 5 lines, it's one short, one long, or something like that. It's written not like we would do in 5 lines. Its long-standing tradition has contributed to the preservation of Japanese language aesthetics, seasonal awareness, deep feelings, vivid imagery, emotional themes of love, longing, affection, sympathy, and understanding are part of the Tanka tradition and make it a cherished literary form in Japan. The work of Mitsu Bader was published both in the United States and Japan, and it provides beautiful examples. I'll read just a few of these very short poems. Did that cloud come from Hokkaido? I remember I saw that cloud one long ago summer. With blue eyes, both my husband and son-in-law worship at my parents' tomb with palms together. My best day. Fallen leaves blown by the wind along the pavement will know where they return to dust. Hometown in my fading memories, how I wish to run again along that white road. While the cherry blossoms are at their best in our Dallas garden, I am stirred to be a Japanese. Sometimes I feel sorry for myself, aging, while a girl dwells within me. These poems were translated by a colleague of mine at Brookhaven.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Those poems are beautiful. We have another special treat today. I know many of you know Mina as a visual artist, but I bet you didn't know she was a poet too. So all right, let's have her read a sample of her poetry. She'll explain the poem to you.
I've been writing and memorizing poetry since I was a teenager, and I've also written some poems about my grandchildren, and I've put them to music. And one of my very favorite poems that has meant a lot to me is Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Eve by Robert Frost. And what I didn't know at the time is Robert Frost is my husband's great uncle. And this is a poem that I have used throughout my life as a way to fall asleep. I'll repeat it over and over till I fall asleep. Or if I'm in a stress situation, I will just repeat it and it will calm me down. But I've always felt that this poem wasn't finished. And so I have finished it. And I hope Robert Frost is okay with that. So I'm going to read Robert Frost's poem, and it ends with "In miles to go before I sleep." And then I will continue it with mine. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lakes, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sound, the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. My horse is keen for journey's end. Up the hill and around the bend, the moon is full and lights the way. I'm homeward bound to make amends. My darlings will enjoy their toy. The dogs will bark and jump for joy. My wife will be a cherished sight. The fire's warmth I will enjoy. The chimney smoke is in my sight. After a long and tiring night, I soon will be in loving arms. Once again my heart will be light. My horse consents we're almost here. Lights from the window do appear. At last we are so very near. At last we are so very near.
Sarah, I have a poem I'd like to share.
Come on.
I wasn't sure whether we were to bring things or not, but I've always thought this would be a great poem.
It's perfectly fine.
Thank you. So I have this on my computer screen at home, and I read it almost every day. It's called Small Kindnesses by Danusia Lamaris. I've been thinking about the way when you walk down a crowded aisle, people pull in their legs to let you by, or how strangers still say, "Bless you," when someone sneezes, a leftover from the bubonic plague. Don't die, we are saying. And sometimes when you spill lemons from your grocery bag, someone else will help you pick them up. Mostly, we don't want to harm each other. We want to be handed our cup of coffee hot and to say thank you to the person handing it. To smile at them and for them to smile back. For the waitress to call us honey when she sits down the bowl of clam chowder. And for the driver in the red pickup truck to let us pass. We have so little of each other now, so far from tribe and fire, only these brief moments of exchange. What if they are the true dwelling of the holy, these fleeting temples we make when we say, "Here, have my seat. Go ahead, you first. I like your hat." Thank you. Thank you, Sarah.
Any other poetry someone wants to read? All right, that was nice. It was a nice surprise. So let's have someone here?
Sarah, I have a very silly one if we would like a fight.
Silly poems are great. Come on down. Boy, Poetry Sunday is turning into a poetry slam. I love it.
Okay, so this is one I wrote when my husband and I were trying to figure out if we wanted to move. Do we want to stay where we are? Moving is expensive. Do we want to do this? I don't know. This was years ago. We did end up moving, and we're quite happy with where we were. But while we were trying to figure out what to do, I wrote this poem, and it's called Settlers. So, little double entendre there. Okay. We've painted the walls and decked the halls, but you can tell someone else used to live here. It's not quite what we wanted. It's not even haunted. We can't stay for more than a year. We should have held out and built our own dream instead of listening to your stupid friend Tony. We had a list of things we couldn't miss, a fireplace and room for a pony. But Tony was sure that the charming allure of a house in the city would sway our minds to the idea, and we'd be happy here. And to the horse, we'd choose to say nay. I can't quite get used to the way that it smells, that mixture of mothballs and paint. But for now, we must deal with its great curb appeal and zero lot line, so quaint.
So, anyone else? Come on. Yay! You won't need to stool with you.
Okay.
You'll be too tall.
Okay, this is a short poem by Ogden Nash. It's on the antiquity of fleas. Adam had 'em.
Yay! So, I want one more round of applause for our poets and readers of poetry. Yay! I hope you'll all come back to church chats. We have lots to talk about, lots of poetry to talk about, and other things too, maybe. So I want to remind you that we are resilient people, and we're going to get through whatever we need to get through. We're all here for each other. O Spirit of love and life, lead us from death to life, from falsehood to truth. Lead us from despair to hope, from fear to trust. Lead us from hate to love, from war to peace. Let peace fill our hearts, our world, our universe. Deep peace of the running wave to you. Deep peace of the flowing air to you. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the shining stars to you. Deep peace of the infinite peace to you.